Hey there, survivor. If you can hear this, it means you're still alive. This is Jack's Nightmares, and wherever you're listening from, I'm glad you made it. Now get comfortable. This is your next story. The tarp shifts with a hollow snap, tugged taut by the morning wind. It's still dark under the lean-to, but not night dark. A faint light is bleeding up from the edge of the horizon, just enough to catch on the aluminum cans wired around the perimeter. They rattle softly. No pattern, no rhythm, just loose metal brushing itself into my nerves. I don't move right away. Been living long enough like this to know that most trouble doesn't arrive all at once. It trickles in, sound, shape, stink, and if you wait, sometimes it passes. Sometimes it circles. This morning, nothing circles. It's quiet in a bad way, but not dangerous yet. So I sit up slowly, careful not to shift my weight too hard on the wooden slats I laid under the tarp. One of the boards cracked last week. Haven't found a clean one to replace it. It creaks when I stand. First thing I do is check my hands. Left, then right, palms first, then backs. It's a habit now. Might be the reason I'm still alive. I look for nicks, splits, any cuts I don't remember. My knuckles are dry and cracked from the salt air, and the way I hold tools too tight when I work. One scab, left side, pink but not weeping. I wash it with the last of yesterday's boiled water. I wrap it again with gauze I cut into strips days ago from a cruise line pillowcase, thick and stiff but clean. I've had a rule since the beginning. Never ignore a wound, no matter how small. Seen too many people lose their minds or their limbs because they let something go. Infection used to mean antibiotics and hospitals. Now it means fever, confusion, and your own body trying to kill people around you. Nobody survives the virus, but even plain rot will take you down just as fast. Water check comes next. I count it out in my head before I even open the cooler. 3 sealed bottles, 1 half full that's safe. The rest is runoff water I filtered through a charcoal sock I rigged from an air conditioner unit and some sand. I boiled it yesterday and let it sit overnight. It still tastes like metal. Doesn't matter. My shelter is hidden behind a broken lifeguard station, about 60 feet from the high tide line. I spent 3 days clearing the area and building walls from scrap wood, crushed pallets, and fiberglass paneling. The tarp was the real find, ripped from an old dive boat, bright blue and white, but I coated it with beach mud and ash so it doesn't reflect sunlight. The space inside barely fits me lying down, but it stays dry, mostly. I eat slow, 3 crackers and 1/3 of a can of tuna. I chew like I'm sitting across from someone, like I'm trying to prove I'm civilized. There's no one. There hasn't been anyone for a long time. Not since that couple passed through back in the wet season, and the man couldn't keep quiet. I told them not to light a fire. He did anyway. He didn't wake up the next morning. She screamed and gave away their position. I didn't have time to go back. The beach has been mine since then. Mine in the sense that I know where the broken glass is, which tide pools hide fish, which places stink too sweet to be natural. I move around it like someone who built it, even though it's falling apart more every week. There's a collapsed bar near the eastern ridge, the kind that used to serve margaritas to tourists. I gutted it for the solar garden lights out front and pulled a few ceiling fans from inside. Still haven't figured out what to do with them. Could use the wiring. I used to be a cleaner, not the kind with guns or secrets. Just someone who mopped, wiped, scrubbed, and moved on. It taught me 2 things that ended up saving my life. First, pay attention to the quiet spots. Second, touch nothing until you know where it's been. Before that, I was a junkie, a drunk, and a problem in the lives of people who didn't deserve me. Got out before the world ended. I never figured out whether that was luck or guilt. The first signs of the outbreak weren't what people thought. It wasn't mass panic or screaming hospitals. It was people not showing up to work. People looking wrong when they walked. Nurses with scratches they didn't want to explain. I saw it in the eyes of a man passed out in a lobby I was cleaning. His fingers were twitching like he was dreaming of violence. I didn't stick around. By the time the news caught up, everything local was already locked down. The police stopped responding after the second week. The National Guard came through once. They left with less than they brought. After that, the coast became a place to vanish, not survive. Unless you had discipline, I do now. I check my traps before the sun hits high. I've got 4 basic snare rigs with fishing line and soup cans. They work about half the time. Caught a rabbit last week. Nothing today. 1 line is cut. I trace it until I find a boot print in the sand. Someone passed by in the night. Human. Too fresh to be weeks old. Too clean to be a wanderer. No blood. No bite pattern. They didn't steal anything. Just walked. I don't call out. I never do. If they wanted to be seen, they would have stayed. If they circle back, I'll hear them. I shift my camp gear into the fallback spot behind the dry dock, just in case. One mistake I don't make anymore is assuming people are less dangerous than the infected. The infected don't lie. They don't trick. They just come straight for you. Speaking of, there's one about 80 yards south, tangled in driftwood. She's bloated, dress torn, ankle twisted under a log. But she's moving. Barely. Every minute or so, her arm spasms. No coordination. Just signal noise. She's not fresh. But that doesn't mean she's harmless. I stay out of her sight line and drag a chunk of fiberglass over the entrance to my shelter. Around noon, I scan the water again. That's when I see it. Same as I did yesterday. And the day before. A dark shape far off the coast. Too big to be a boat. Too solid to be a trick of the haze. It's been sitting there, dead still, for days. Maybe a week. I check it every morning through the binoculars I salvaged from a dive shop. The lenses are scratched, and one of them smears near the edge. But it works. It took me 3 days just to convince myself it wasn't a hallucination. 4 more to accept that it might be real and reachable. I can't see the hull details. Just the structure. Layered decks. Tall. Built up, not out. That screams cruise ship. I remember working on one like it. I was on a cleaning crew for months and helping on kitchen. Never saw daylight except on my breaks. Back stairwells, elevators, laundry rooms. I remember getting lost more than once. I don't what is waiting for me. If it's dead in the water, it's not going anywhere. I also don't know what's waiting on board. It could be empty. It could be crawling with infected. Or worse, somewhere in between. A sealed room with a single one inside could take everything from me. One scream, and the sound would bounce through those halls for miles. But I can't ignore it anymore. The shoreline is giving less and less. My canned food is down to 2 dented tins, and 1 packet of jerky that's probably moldy. Fishing has been off since the last storm rolled debris across the reef. Most of the stores are stripped bare. I've stretched this coastline as long as I can. If there's anything left in that ship, food, medicine, sealed water, even a place to breathe without waiting for footsteps, I have to try. Not today. Not without checking conditions. But soon. I patched the boat in the afternoon. It's an old wooden skiff I found half buried behind the dockmaster's office months ago. I reinforced the seams with resin, bits of roofing, and wax-dipped cloth. It leaks if you go too fast, but if I keep the weight balanced, it floats. I test it in the tide pool again, and mark the waterline with a stripe of red nail polish I found in a spar bag. If it rides lower than that, I bail. I paddle it out about 100 feet and back, just to see how it handles. The current is sluggish today. That helps. Wind's mild. I check the sky. No clouds building. That gives me a window. Tomorrow, I'll load my pack, lash everything down, and go. I'll aim for the port side if the drift keeps its orientation. I'll time it with the tide, wait for daylight, and hope the hull still has something climbable. Tonight, I'll eat the last of the dry crackers. I'll pack the lighters, tape, 2 bottles of water, and 1 rusted multi-tool I've cleaned with bleach so many times, the grip's worn smooth. I'll bring the binoculars and the gloves and my 1 good bandana. I'll leave behind the radio. No one's listening anyway. I don't sleep right after that. I sit under the tarp with my back against the lifeguard station wall, and I do the slow work that keeps me alive. I lay every item out on a towel, and I touch each piece in order. Knife, tape, bandage strips, lighter, spare batteries, flashlight, gloves, bandana, water. I check the seams of the pack, then the knots I use to lash things down. I tighten the cord until it bites into the fabric. If a wave flips my boat and my pack floats away, my choices turn into one choice. I don't let that happen. I also set out clothes for morning, long sleeves even in heat, pants even when mosquitoes chew through, boots, not sandals. Skin is not just skin anymore. Skin is a barrier that has to stay intact. A scratch from a rusty edge can still get infected. A bite ends the day fast. Blood in the eyes or mouth can end it even faster. I learned all of that from other people first, then from my own mistakes. I used to watch tourists act careless around boats, drinking, laughing, stepping barefoot on docks with hooks and broken glass. Back then, it was annoying. Now it feels unreal that I ever saw it. Back then, somebody could get stitched up and go home. Now I watch my own hands for cracks and I treat them the way someone treats money when he has none left. The beach quiets after dark, but it never becomes safe. Infected wander in and out with the tide and whatever sound carries. Some nights there are none, and I can hear crickets inland. Other nights the wind shifts and I hear the scrape of feet on concrete and the wet slap of a hand on a wall. I don't shine light unless I have to. Light is information. Light tells the wrong thing where you are. I keep my mouth shut too. I talk to myself during the day because it helps. But at night I don't waste sound. If I need to say something, I say it in my head. The jokes can wait until sunrise. When I finally do sleep, I set the cans at the shelter entrance and I loop fishing line through them again. It is a cheap alarm. It has saved me more than once. It also fails sometimes. On nights when a crab decides to be loud, or when wind shakes the line, it wakes me for nothing. I accept that cost. Nothing costs less. Morning comes thin and grey. The sky looks clean. Wind is low. The ocean has small chop but no whitecaps. I watch it for a long time from behind the lifeguard station, using binoculars, taking my time. The ship is there again. Same blocky silhouette far out, still hard to spot unless I already know where to aim. It drifts a little, then settles. No smoke, no movement. It looks dead in a way that still has weight. I eat the last crumbs from the cracker sleeve, and I drink 2 mouthfuls of water. I leave the rest sealed. I load the pack. I take one more lap around my camp, and I force myself to look at the places I used. The cooler, the hidden stash hole under the driftwood, the little drying rack I made for fish. If I come back, these things matter. If I do not come back, it does not matter if everything is perfect. I stop myself from trying to tidy. That habit is old work trying to take over. It is not useful right now. The boat waits where I left it, pulled into shade behind the marina ruins. I run my palm along the patched seam, and I check for new splits. The resin feels hard. The cloth under it is still tight. I set the boat in shallow water, and I watch how it sits. It rides a little lower than I want, but not enough to call it failure. I shift my pack closer to the center. I tie it down with rope that has been re-knotted so many times, it has a permanent kink. I push off with the paddle and I don't look back at the shore for a while. The first few minutes are always when people make the most mistakes. Arms are fresh. Confidence rises. Then something goes wrong and panic fills the gap. I keep the pace slow. I count strokes under my breath, not loud enough for anyone to hear. 20 strokes, then a short rest with the paddle across my knees. 20 strokes again. The ship does not get bigger in a satisfying way. It grows in small pieces. A darker line that becomes a wall that becomes the side of a hull that becomes chipped paint and streaks and long stains down the metal. At some point, I can smell it. Not the ship itself. The ocean smell changes around it, mixed with oil and something stale that has been trapped inside for too long. When I am close enough to see the damage, I stop paddling, and I let the boat drift. I hold my position with small corrections, and I stare at the hole. The tear is large. The edges are bent outward. There are cables hanging down that sway with the ship's movement. Some snapped, some still anchored deep. A few pieces of insulation hang in strips. The hole is several feet above the waterline. Not too high, but high enough that falling would be bad. I move around the hull edge slowly in my little boat, keeping distance from any place where something could grab. I do not trust the water around the ship. People fall, people hit metal, people get cut, people drown. Infected also drift. I have watched infected float along shore for months, pushed by tide and wind, then snag on rocks and keep moving. I do not want to learn how many infected are in the water around this thing. I spot empty lifeboat mounts along one side. Half the boats are gone. Some mounts are twisted. A few davits look burned or snapped. That tells me there was panic and there were exits. It also tells me there might be supplies missing, because lifeboats have supplies. If someone launched them, that means some people got off. If people got off, that means whatever happened on board was bad enough that even a lifeboat felt safer. I pick the hole anyway because it is my only clear way inside. Ladders are too high. Doors at waterline might be sealed or flooded. This hole is open and it has those cables. I tie my boat off to a thicker cable bundle with a knot that will not slip when wet. I loop the rope twice and I test it with a hard pull. The boat jerks and the rope holds. I pull on gloves. I wrap the bandana over my nose and mouth, not because it stops infection, but because dust and mold mess with my head and make me sloppy. Sloppy is how people die. I clip the flashlight to my belt. I tighten my pack straps. Then I climb. The first cable is too thin. It creaks and shifts under my weight. I move to a thicker one and I grip hard. The rubber coating is cracked, exposing wire. It bites through the glove at one spot and I feel a sting. I stop and I look down. Blood. Not much, but it is blood. I do not keep climbing with an open cut. I hook my elbow through the cable, hold myself steady, and use my teeth to pull the glove off. The cut is shallow. I wipe it with a clean cloth and I wrap it tight with tape. The tape sticks poorly to sweaty skin. I wrap again, then I put the glove back on. I climb the last few feet and I swing my leg into the hole, scraping my boot on jagged metal. I get inside and I shift to the floor carefully. The metal under my feet is slick in spots. I crouch and I hold still, listening. The ship creaks. Somewhere deeper inside, there is a thump, another thump, then a dragging sound that stops. It is far enough that I cannot tell direction. The sound travels weird in metal spaces. I learned that on the last cruise job. Sound moves through corridors, then comes back in unexpected ways. The air inside is warm and heavy. It smells of damp carpet and old food and something that makes me keep my mouth closed. I keep the bandana on. I turn my head slowly, looking for immediate problems. Blood on the wall. Smears low, then higher. Scratches on a door frame. A shoe lying on its side with no foot in it. I do not touch any of it. I close off the hole with a loose panel that hangs nearby, not sealing it, only reducing light and breaking the outline of my movement if something looks toward it. I do not know if infected outside could see me anyway, but I have learned to reduce chances whenever I can. Chance stacks. Enough stacked chances become a problem. I move forward a few steps and I stop at the first intersection. The corridor splits left and right. Both directions are dark. There is a faint green emergency light strip along the floor, dead in some places, dim in others. I do not rely on it. I use my eyes first. If I use the flashlight, I keep it pointed down. I choose right because I see a sign that says, Crew access with an arrow. Crew areas are ugly and practical. Crew areas have storage, maintenance, and closets. Passenger areas have open spaces, glass, and wide halls that carry sound. I do not want to be in a wide hall with no cover. The crew corridor smells less sweet, more chemical, more stale. That feels better. I step around a cart tipped on its side. Cleaning supplies are spilled out. A bottle labeled bleach lies cracked, dried white streaks on the floor. That bottle is dead now, but the smell tells me bleach was used here at some point, not just in normal cleaning. People tried to sanitize. People panicked enough to use strong chemicals. That lines up with what happened on land early on. People thought cleaning could stop it. It cannot. It can slow other sickness, but it does nothing when blood gets inside you. I find a small utility room, with a solid door and a simple latch. Inside are shelves, mops, folded towels, and a metal sink. The tap does nothing. I do not expect it to. I shut the door, turn the latch, and I set my pack down quietly. Then I sit on the floor with my back to the wall, and I do nothing for a full minute except listen. This room becomes my first safe point. Not safe in the way people used to mean. Safe in the sense that I have a door between me and whatever is moving out there. A door is a timer, I know that. Still, a timer is better than nothing. I drink water in measured mouthfuls. I check the cut under the glove again. Tape is holding. I pull out the binoculars, and I consider going back out to the hole and using them to scan the deck. But I stop. I am inside now. My boat is tied to the hull. That boat is my only simple way back. I do not leave it untended for long, but I also do not rush into open deck without knowing where infected are. Rushing is how I used to live. That was a different life. It almost killed me before the world ended. After the minute passes, I stand and I work. I find a wedge of broken plastic and I jam it under the door in a way that reduces rattling. I move a mop bucket away from the wall so it cannot roll and bang. I take the time to hang a loose metal hook so it stops tapping. These little noises matter. Infected react to sound, not to logic. If this ship settles and something clanks, infected will drift toward it. That drift might bring infected to my door. I would prefer that drift happen somewhere else. I head back into the corridor and I start mapping. Not with paper yet, with memory and careful repetition. I walk 10 steps, stop, look at signs, turn back, return to my utility room. I do this again and again. It is slow. It is also how I learned buildings when I cleaned. You learn routes. You learn which doors are usually unlocked. You learn which stairs are staff only. This ship is the same kind of puzzle. Only now a wrong turn can end the day. I find a crew stairwell with a fire door. The door is heavy and it closes on its own. I test it. It latches. That is useful. I open it again. The stairwell goes up and down. Down is darker. It also smells worse. I do not go down yet. Most ships have lower decks that flood. Flooded decks grow mold and trap bodies. I do not want to be in a lower deck without reason. I go up one level, slow. I peek out into another service corridor. This one has more debris, clothing, a broken radio handset, a smear of blood down a wall, then footprints that track through it. Barefoot. The blood is old, dry, brown-black. That tells me this happened a while ago, but time inside a ship is confusing. Without sun or fresh air, things change slower in some places and faster in others. I hear a new sound. A low groan that ends in a wet cough. It is not a human cough. It is not a normal sickness. It is the sound infected make when the body tries to breathe and the brain is not in charge anymore. I stop moving. I shift back into the stairwell and I close the fire door with control, not letting it slam. I wait. The sound drifts closer. There is a dragging foot, then a slap, then another drag. I look through the small wired glass window in the fire door. The corridor is dim, but I see movement. A figure, hunched. The head jerks toward the door, then away. The infected is scanning for sound. The infected is not thinking. The infected is reacting. I back down the stairs a few steps and I stay still. The infected reaches the door and bumps it once. Then again. The metal holds. The infected presses face and hands against the glass. The face is slack, mouth open, skin grey in patches, dried blood around the lips. The eyes track movement on the other side, but I am not moving. The infected stops pushing and stands there for a long time, making low sounds. Then the infected turns away and drags down the corridor. I let it go. I do not chase. I do not fight when a door did the job for me. I wait until the sound fades. Then I go back down to my utility room. That room is still my safest known point. The ship is already teaching me rules. I respect them. By midday, I have a rough mental map. My entry hole, 2 corridors, 1 stairwell, and the utility room. That is not much, but it is a start. I also have a new problem, my boat. It is tied outside and the tide is rising. If the rope rubs metal and frays, the boat becomes driftwood. I cannot accept that. I move back toward the hole with care. I take the route that kept me away from the infected I saw. I keep the flashlight off unless I have to. When I reach the tear in the hull, I crouch and I peer out into daylight. The water is darker here. Shadows from the hull make it look deeper. My boat sits below, bumping softly against the ship when waves lift it. The rope is tight. I see wear where it rubs the cable. I take out tape and I wrap the rope where it contacts metal. Tape is not perfect, but it reduces friction. I also tie a second backup line to a different cable bundle. It is extra work now, but it removes one future panic. I look around the surface of the water, scanning for movement. I see debris, a floating bag, a chunk of foam. No infected at the surface. That does not mean there are none. It only means none are floating near me right now. I use the binoculars from inside the hole and I scan the upper decks. The ship is massive up close. Rows of balcony cabins, glass doors, railings. Some are bent. Some sections are blackened from fire. I can see stains on the deck that could be blood or spilled drinks or both. I can also see something that makes me keep my hands on the edge of the hull and not climb out. There are infected on the deck, several, not dozens in a clump, but scattered. Some stand still, some wander. One bumps a lounge chair and sends it scraping across the deck. The scraping sound echoes, and two more infected turn and shuffle toward it. That tells me the sound rule holds here too. Sound is the string that pulls them. I retreat back inside. I do not want to cross open deck with infected above. I do not have range or cover. I also do not want to get trapped outside with nowhere to go except back into the hole. That hole is a choke point. Choke points can protect you or kill you, depending on timing. I spend the afternoon searching for supplies without roaming far. I check adjacent rooms along crew corridors. Some are locked, some are open. Many are emptied. I find towels, soap, a few sealed cleaning wipes, and a box of disposable gloves. Gloves matter. I take them. I find a small first aid kit in a wall cabinet, mostly empty, but it has antiseptic wipes and a roll of medical tape. I take those too. Food is harder. Crew fridges are dead. The smell tells me not to open some doors. I open one pantry and I see a swarm of insects and I close it again. I do not need sickness. I check vending machines and find them smashed. I find a half-eaten candy bar stuck to a floor. That is not food. That is bait for stupidity. I walk away. Near evening, I find something useful. A laminated ship diagram posted near a staff elevator area. It shows decks, stairwells, and some labeled zones. Passenger decks, crew decks, service corridors, storage. It is not detailed enough to show every route, but it gives me structure. It tells me where storage might be. It tells me where medical might be. It tells me where lifeboat stations are. I stare at the diagram for a long time. The ship is bigger than anything I have lived inside before. Bigger than malls. Bigger than hotels. It is a floating city with its own traps. I take a marker from a desk and I circle my approximate position. I do not trust it fully, but it helps. It gives me a direction. Night on the ship is a different kind of dark. No streetlights, no city glow. The interior becomes black except for the faintest bleed of moonlight through windows and the dead green strips along some corridors. Every sound feels louder. The ship creaks more when the temperature drops. Loose objects shift. I choose to sleep in the utility room again. Not because it is comfortable, because it is familiar. Familiar is valuable. I wedge the door. I set up a simple noise alarm by hanging a few metal hooks on a string near the door, so if the door moves, the hooks clatter. It is not perfect, but it tells me if something pushes the door. Before I lie down, I eat the last bit of tuna from yesterday's can. Then I force myself to stop. I do not eat my future in one night. I drink a mouthful of water. I wrap the cut again. Then I sleep in short cycles, waking to every creak and checking the door each time. Morning comes with fog over the sea. Through a small porthole, I can see the sky is pale and flat. Fog makes sound carry differently. It also makes the ship harder to spot from shore. That matches what I saw before. At distance, this ship blends into haze. It becomes a faint block, easy to miss. That makes me feel less watched by the land, but it also makes me feel cut off. If I wanted to return, it would not be simple in fog. I decide that today's goal is clear. Find storage. Find sealed supplies. If I cannot find sealed supplies within 2 days, the ship becomes a dead end. I can live on the shore with discomfort. I cannot live inside a ship that offers only spoiled buffet scraps and contaminated water. I move toward the area the diagram suggests has service storage, using the stairwell routes that keep me behind fire doors when possible. I go slowly. Every time I pass an intersection, I mark it with a piece of tape placed low, near the floor, facing the direction back to my utility room. Tape is my breadcrumb. If I get turned around, tape brings me home. The first big complication happens when I open a door and I trigger a noise. The door sticks, then pops free with a loud crack. The sound travels. It echoes through a stairwell and out into a larger passenger corridor. The crack is the sort of sound that pulls infected hard. I freeze. I close the door again, but the damage is done. I hear movement almost immediately. Not close at first, then closer. The dragging shuffle becomes multiple shuffles. A low chorus of wet vocal sounds begins to build. I step back into the stairwell, close the heavy door, and latch it. I hold the latch, keeping pressure so it does not rattle. Through the wired glass window, I see shapes approaching. 3 infected first, then more behind, drawn toward the crack sound. One bumps the door, then another. Their hands press and slide. Their heads jerk, searching. The door holds. The window flexes slightly. This is what a door is in this world, a timer. I do not wait for the timer to end. I go down the stairwell and I move to the next fire door. I close it behind me too. If the infected push through the first door eventually, the second door buys more time. I use the ship's own safety design. It was built to slow fire. Now it slows infected. I keep moving until I find a quiet crew corridor again. Then I stop and I listen. The infected sounds stay behind me, muffled. Good. That means they are still pressing toward the first sound source and not following my footsteps. I control my footsteps anyway, placing heels and toes carefully, keeping weight smooth. I reach a storage area behind a door labeled Provisions. The door is locked. Not a simple latch, a padlock. That is good news and bad news. Good because locked doors often hide things. Bad because forcing a lock makes noise, and noise brings infected. I step back and I examine the corridor around me. There is a side service hall. There is a closed stairwell. There is also a heavy cart tipped against a wall, and a loose metal pipe on the floor. I pick up the pipe and I test its weight. It is too loud to swing. I can use it as leverage, not as a weapon. I decide to wait. I do not break the lock now. I want a better sound cover. I want the ship to creak and groan enough to hide my work. I also want to know if any infected roam nearby. I sit on the floor behind a cart, and I wait for 10 minutes, watching the corridor. Nothing comes. That does not mean the ship is empty. It only means this pocket is quiet right now. I take the pipe, set it through the lock hasp, and twist with slow pressure. Metal complains. I stop when it squeals, and I wait for another creak from the ship. When a deep groan passes through the hull, I twist again. The hasp bends. I twist once more. The padlock pops free and clatters to the floor. The clatter is loud. It echoes. I immediately pick up the lock and set it gently on a piece of cloth. I open the door just enough to slip inside and I close it behind me. The room is a cage of shelves and crates. It smells of cardboard and plastic, not rot. That smell is relief. I keep the door closed and I sweep my flashlight low across the shelves. There is bottled water, cases of it, not infinite, but enough to change my next month. There are canned goods, boxes of ration bars that look like emergency stock. There are packages of dried food sealed in thick plastic. There are batteries still in packaging. There are bandages, antiseptic, basic meds. There are handheld radios, still sealed in plastic, with spare batteries in a box. There is also alcohol in sealed bottles, some small, some large, likely pulled from ship bars and stored here when the crew tried to control inventory. I do not celebrate. I do not laugh. I start working. I inventory quickly with my eyes. I choose what I can carry without slowing myself into danger. 2 bottles of water, 4 ration bars, 1 can of food, a pack of batteries, a small first aid kit. I also take 1 bottle of alcohol, not for drinking, but because it can clean wounds and it can trade value for my brain. I know what alcohol does to me. I do not pretend I can sip it casually in the dark and stay sober. I treat it as a chemical tool. I load my pack until the straps strain. I do not take everything because I cannot. This is not a shopping trip. This is a supply line. I have to move stock from this room to my base in multiple trips, and each trip is exposure. I accept that. I also plan for it. I choose a nearby side closet in a crew corridor, and I move a small cache there first so I am not hauling from the provisions room to my base in one long run every time. I turn the closet into a halfway storage point. That reduces distance and reduces time in open corridors. I make my first carry back toward my utility room, using the stairwell fire doors again. I move during ship groans when possible. The ship is noisy today in a deep way, shifting against tide. That helps me. When the ship creaks, my footfalls hide. Halfway back, I hear infected again. Not the same cluster from the cracked door earlier, but a smaller set, closer. I stop in a service corridor behind a linen cart, and I wait. The infected shuffles past an intersection ahead, moving towards something I cannot see. A loose door slaps somewhere. That door becomes the new sound source. The infected turn toward it. I stay still until their sounds fade. Back in my utility room, I set water down first, then food, then batteries, then the first aid kit. I close the door, and I sit on the floor for a moment, and I let my mind try to run away. I do not allow it. I open 1 ration bar and I eat half. It tastes dry and sweet. It feels like something I am not supposed to enjoy. I eat anyway. This is the first real win since the coast started collapsing. The next days become work, not adventure. I run supply trips. I adjust my routes. I secure the utility room into a real base. I pull a small mattress from a crew cabin and drag it across the floor in short bursts, stopping often to listen. Dragging makes noise. I drag only when the ship is loud. I find a better base later, but the utility room holds for now. I also start learning the ship's rhythm. Infected cluster around loud spots. When a window bangs from wind, infected gravitate there and keep pressing. When the ship tilts and a loose cart rolls, infected drift toward the crash and then linger. If I keep my area quiet and I fix the small noises near my base, infected pass by more often than they gather. I cannot clear the ship. That would be a fantasy. There are too many infected in too many corridors. I can only carve a route, a spine of safe movement, and keep it maintained. I begin choosing that spine deliberately. Base room, stairwell, storage cache, upper deck lookout, nothing else unless necessary. On the 3rd day on board, I hear a sound that stops me. A low growl from behind a cabin door. Not an infected sound. Not human. Animal. I approach the door slowly. I do not put my face near the crack. I do not move fast. I speak in a low voice, calm, not loud enough to travel down the corridor. Easy. I'm not here to take your food. My own words sound strange, but the tone matters. Animals read tone even when they do not understand words. The growl deepens. A bark follows, sharp and angry, then silence. That bark is loud enough to make my shoulders tighten and my feet shift back without thinking. Loud bark means infected might hear. Loud bark also means the animal is scared enough to fight. I back away 2 steps, and I listen for infected response. None immediately. The ship is quiet in this corridor. That is luck I cannot waste. I squat and I look through the gap under the door. I see a pair of eyes and a muzzle pressed close to the floor. Dog. I crack the door open 2 inches, keeping my body behind it, hand ready to slam it shut if the dog lunges. The dog is medium size, lean, ribs visible, coat dull, eyes alert. The dog stands between me and a pile of torn bedding in the corner, guarding it. There is a collar on the dog's neck. Metal tag catches a sliver of light. It reads, Max. Max bares teeth and growls again. I do not move forward. I do not reach. A bite from a dog might not carry the virus the same way, but a bite still breaks skin and blood still moves. Also, a bite means infection from bacteria. I cannot risk that. I close the door gently and I step away, leaving Max space. That night, I bring a bottle cap filled with water and I place it outside Max's door. I also leave a small piece of ration bar. Then I walk away. I do not hover. Hovering feels like pressure. Pressure makes animals bite. The next morning, the cap is empty. The ration piece is gone. That tells me Max is still alive and still cautious. I repeat the offering. Water first, then food. Always the same. Routine builds trust. Routine also keeps me stable. The old part of me that wants quick results and careless wins has to stay silent. While I work on Max's trust, I work on everything else too. Water is still my main worry. Bottled water can last, but it is finite. I run a count. The provisions room had several cases, but not enough to pretend I will never run out. I plan for rain capture. I scavenge clean plastic sheeting from a lifeboat station supply bin, and I rig it on an upper deck, sloped into a container. When rain comes, it will fill slowly. When rain does not come, it does nothing. That is the cost. Still, it is better than trusting ship tanks. I find chlorine tablets in an emergency kit, and I treat any questionable water with them. The taste is harsh, but harsh is better than sick. I also find a small portable water filter in a sealed box. It looks meant for lifeboats. I read the instructions twice. I do not assume I know it. I test it with rainwater first when I finally get a short storm. The filter works. Slow. It clogs if the water is dirty. It becomes another tool I have to protect. Light becomes the next problem. My flashlight batteries do not last forever. The ship's emergency strips are dim and unreliable. I search for battery-backed corridor lights, and I find a panel labeled Emergency Lighting. It has switches and warning labels. I hesitate. Panels make sounds. Panels trigger alarms. Still, working in darkness costs more. I flip one switch. A faint hum begins. A row of low lights in the corridor flickers on, then steadies. The light is weak, but it gives shape to doors and corners. It also makes a soft beep on the panel. I freeze, listening for infected reaction. None immediate. The ship creaks once. The lights hold. I keep the lights off most of the time, and I only use them for short work periods. That becomes another routine. Light on, move quickly, then light off and listen. If infected begin to drift toward the lit corridor, I shut it down, and I wait. Nothing is free. I keep pushing my safe spine outward. I mark doors. I block side corridors with furniture, not to seal them completely, but to slow movement and to create noise if something pushes through. I string cans on fishing line at key intersections. If a can rattles, I know something moved there. It is primitive, but it works. The first real fight on the ship happens because of my own mistake. I am hauling a box of batteries from my halfway cache when the box slips. It hits the floor and the batteries inside rattle. The sound is sharp. It bounces off metal walls and carries up the stairwell. I stop moving. I set the box down gently. I look both directions down the corridor. Nothing. Then I hear the response. A quick shuffle and a low vocal sound from the far end, then another closer. I back into a small crew office and I shut the door. The office has a desk, a chair, and a cabinet. The door has a simple latch, not heavy. I know that latch will not hold long if an infected presses. I do not plan to stay. I plan to use the office as a momentary barrier. The infected reaches the corridor outside and bumps the door once, then again. The latch flexes. I look around the office fast. There is no second exit. That is bad. I have seconds. I drag the desk toward the door and I wedge it against the handle. Not to stop the door forever, but to slow it. The door shudders under impact. I hear a wet cough, then a snarl sound that does not belong to a person with control. I do not wait for the desk to fail. I climb onto the desk and I reach for the ceiling vent panel above. The screws are loose, one missing. Someone before me tried this. That helps me. I use the multi-tool to pry the vent open. Dust falls. I keep my mouth closed under the bandana. I push the panel aside and I pull myself up, elbows scraping metal. My pack catches for a moment and I feel the strap tear slightly. I free it and I crawl into the vent. The infected hits the door hard enough that the desk shifts and the door opens a crack. I see fingers pushing into the gap. The infected forces it wider. The desk buys me only a little time. I crawl faster, metal scraping under my knees. The vent drops me into the adjacent corridor a few yards away through another loose panel. I push it open and I slide out quietly. Then I close it again. I move away without running. Running makes noise. Noise pulls more. I retreat down the corridor toward a fire door and I slip through, closing it behind me. I listen. The infected is still in the office, probably trapped between desk and door in confusion. It will eventually wander when the sound stops. I let it. I take my battery box later. For now, I accept the loss. That is another rule. Do not die for equipment. That night, I go to Max's door again with water and food. This time, when I set the items down and I step back, the door handle moves slightly. The door opens a crack, and Max's nose appears first, sniffing. The dog takes the food and retreats. The eyes stay on me. The growl is softer. That is progress. I talk quietly to Max from the hallway, sitting down with my back against the opposite wall, hands visible, body turned slightly away. I tell Max my name. I tell Max I used to clean ships and now I live in one. I tell Max the rules I live by. I do not expect Max to understand. The sound is for me too. It keeps my mind from collapsing inward. I also tell Max something I do not tell many things anymore. I tell Max that I'm tired. Not tired in a dramatic way. Tired in a day-by-day way. The coast asked for a fight every morning. This ship asks for work. Work is easier to handle than constant running. Days pass. I lose count of exact day numbers, so I mark them with tape strips on the wall inside my base room. 1 strip per morning. When I get to 10 strips, I stop and look at them. 10 mornings since I boarded. I am still alive. The ship has not eaten me yet. My base shifts from the utility room to a small crew cabin near a service stairwell. The cabin has a sturdier door and a small bathroom. The tap still does not work, but the bathroom gives privacy and reduces smell issues. I clean it with wipes and a small amount of bleach solution made from tablet residue. Mold is a constant threat. I keep bedding dry. I keep vents clear when possible. I move anything damp into a sealed bag, and I throw it overboard when I can. Not because it solves the world, but because it reduces sickness in my corner. Max begins to follow at a distance after about a week. Not close, not trusting. Max pads behind me in corridors when I move slowly. If I turn too fast, Max backs away. If a ship creak sounds sharp, Max freezes. The dog is learning the ship sounds the same way I am. Max also gives me warnings. Max's ears shift before I hear shuffling. Max's head turns toward distant noise faster than mine. That changes how I move. I stop sooner. I listen longer. I avoid corners when Max stiffens. Max does not bark much. The dog has learned the ship punishes noise. When Max does bark once, it is because an infected suddenly appears at the far end of a corridor, head jerking toward Max. The bark is one sharp sound. It is enough. The infected lunges forward in a burst. Max bolts, nails scraping on the floor. That scrape pulls more attention than the bark. I do not chase Max in a panic. I control my movement, and I step back into a side room, pulling the door almost closed. I watch the corridor through a crack. The infected charges toward where Max ran, then slows, then turns toward new sounds created by the chase. 1 infected becomes 2, 2 become 4. The group clusters in the corridor, shoving into each other, drawn by the noise echoing off walls. I wait until the cluster drifts away toward another banging door. Then I move, keeping my steps soft. I find Max near a stairwell landing, pressed against the wall, teeth bared, shaking but silent. I squat low, keep my hands down, and I hold a piece of ration bar out without pushing it forward. Max takes it and backs up. Then Max stays. That is all I need. I guide Max back toward my base, using slow steps and quiet voice. The dog chooses to sleep inside my cabin that night. Not on the bed, on the floor near the door, guarding, still unsure, still willing to stay. I do not touch Max. I let Max choose distance. Trust is built from consistent days, not from one emotional moment. The ship drifts slowly over time. I notice because the view from the upper deck changes. Shoreline shifts in the binoculars, sometimes clearer, sometimes gone behind haze. Some mornings I cannot see land at all, only grey sea and fog. That increases the sense of isolation, but it also reduces one worry. Nobody is watching from shore because nobody is there to watch. And even if someone existed, this ship is difficult to spot at distance when light is flat. I climb to an upper deck lookout every few days, using my safe spine route. The climb is always tense because the upper decks have more open areas, and infected roam there. I time it for midday when light through windows makes corridors less dark, and I can keep my flashlight off. I move in short stages, closing fire doors behind me, pausing at each landing to listen. From the lookout, I scan sea for boats. Nothing. No wakes, no smoke columns, no distant engine sound. I scan shore. The island looks quiet. Too quiet. I do not see fires. I do not see movement. I see ruined hotels and broken roads, and the occasional infected dotting the sand far away. That is all. I think about my old life sometimes, but not in the way people imagine. I do not sit still and mourn for hours. The world does not allow that kind of time anymore. Instead, memories come while I work, tied to movement and routine. The smell of cleaning solution from my old jobs, the sound of a vacuum dragging across carpet, a supervisor shouting about fingerprints on glass that nobody else noticed. I remember leaving work and drinking until my name felt distant. Then I remember the first week I stayed sober long enough to notice my hands stopped shaking in the morning. That memory matters now. It reminds me that routine is something I can hold on to, even when everything else is unstable. The ship rewards routine the same way sobriety did. When I follow my rules, I stay alive. When I rush or improvise without thinking, the ship pushes back immediately. There is no forgiveness built into its design, only delays and consequences. The storm comes without warning, because I have no weather app, no radio chatter, and no forecast beyond what my body tells me. The sky darkens in the middle of the afternoon. Wind rises fast. The ship begins to groan and shift under its own weight. Objects I failed to secure roll and bang across decks and corridors. Each impact sends sound traveling through metal and air. I hear infected responding in layers, movement building across decks as the noise field changes. I spend the storm doing the work that never looks heroic. I brace doors so they do not swing. I wedge carts into corners. I tie down loose metal in corridors near my base so it stops clanging when the ship tilts. I move Max into my cabin and close the door. Max watches every motion I make, tracking urgency even without understanding the cause. The dog does not know the ship, but he understands when speed and control matter. A heavy crash echoes from somewhere below, followed by a long scrape that travels through the hull. Something large broke loose. That sound pulls infected toward it. I hear the pattern shift as some infected move away from my area, while others cluster closer, drawn by new noises that overlap and interfere with each other. The storm turns the ship into an unpredictable sound trap. That is dangerous because I can no longer rely on past movement patterns. At one point, a fire door down my corridor slams shut from a gust, then rebounds and slams again. The repeated impact becomes a magnet. I hear infected converging, pulled by the rhythm. I cannot allow them to gather near my base. If they pile up here, I lose control of the corridor. I decide on a distraction, nothing dramatic. No fire, no alarms. just a controlled sound placed far enough away to redirect attention. I move along my safe spine to a maintenance junction 2 corridors over where a loose metal sign hangs from a single screw. I had noticed it days earlier and left it alone because it was distant. Now I tilt it slightly, making it catch more wind. When the ship shifts, the sign begins to clack steadily, louder than before. When I return, the slamming fire door has quieted. Infected movement shifts toward the new sound source. Pressure near my base eases. I close my cabin door and sit on the floor with Max, my back against the wall, listening as the ship complains through the storm. The storm lasts for hours. I do not sleep. I eat little. I sip water in small amounts. I check my cut and then check Max. I keep my hands busy retying knots and cleaning my knife. Staying occupied keeps me from making impulsive decisions that feel good and end badly. After the storm passes, the ship feels different, not in a dramatic way, but in a physical one. Doors that were stuck open are now closed. Corridors that were blocked are partially cleared where debris shifted. Other passages are newly obstructed. My safe spine still exists, but it needs work. I walk it carefully, inspecting every barrier and marker, resetting traps, tightening rope, and wedging carts back into place. I also notice the smell of rot is stronger in one stairwell. When I look down through the gap, I see standing water on a lower landing that was not there before. The storm pushed seawater into a breach or shifted something enough to let it spread. Flooded areas will worsen over time, mold will grow, bodies will move. Infected may be contained by water or drift into new openings. The ship's interior is not stable, which means my safety plan cannot be either. The next day, I see the result more clearly. Near the lower edge of the hull, close to the tear where I entered, something bumps against the metal. I watch through binoculars from inside the opening. It is an infected body, bloated, caught on debris. The arms still jerk. The head still tilts when sound carries. It is not swimming. It is floating and reacting. The infected cannot climb into the opening because it sits too high above the waterline. Still, it confirms something important. The sea will bring more over time. The infected population on this ship is not fixed. It will change slowly and unpredictably. Max watches the water with me, body tense, ears stiff. He does not growl. He stays close to my leg. That closeness is new. I let him decide the distance. I improve the entry point to reduce risk. I build a simple rope ladder using thick rope and evenly spaced knots. I secure it to a cable bundle and test it with my weight. It holds. That makes future checks easier and reduces the chance of another cut from exposed wire. Rope and tape are limited resources, but falling costs more. I begin moving supplies from the provisions room to my base in a controlled pattern. One haul in the morning, one in the afternoon, never more. Overworking leads to mistakes. Mistakes make noise. Noise draws infected. I also place small caches along my safe spine, so I have options if my base is compromised. Max becomes part of the routine. I portion food carefully. I do not let myself give extra because it feels kind. Kindness without planning becomes starvation later. I find dog treats in a cabin minibar stash and reserve them for trust building and emergencies. Max responds to food, but he responds more to calm movement and consistent behavior. One afternoon, I decide to explore medical, not expecting miracles, just supplies that reduce risk. The area sits near a central corridor, which means higher infected traffic. I go light and leave Max behind to avoid paw injuries. Medical is partially stripped, but I recover bandages, antiseptic, gloves, and a sealed case of bottled water hidden behind a fallen cabinet. Panic stalked this room, and an accident preserved it. On the return trip, I hear 2 infected ahead. I observe their movement patterns, note the burst speed followed by slower pacing, and choose a longer detour through fire doors instead of forcing a crossing. The detour costs time and water, but it preserves skin. Back at my base, Max greets me cautiously, tracking my hands, and then the water stash. He is learning my routines. That can be useful or dangerous, so I keep departures and returns calm and uneventful. Weeks pass unevenly. The ship becomes familiar in fragments. I learn which doors squeak and oil them sparingly. I learn which panels bang in wind and secure them when risk allows. Boredom remains my biggest weakness. Boredom is where bad ideas grow. To fight it, I assign real tasks: cleaning, inventory, maintenance. I keep a written list on a laminated menu board using pencil. Water, food, batteries, medical. If numbers drop faster than expected, I adjust. The infected remain constant. They drift towards sound. They cluster around repetition. If I keep my corner quiet, most days pass without contact. When contact cannot be avoided, barriers and patience matter more than strength. I accept the ship's limits as time goes on. Engines are unreachable without deep knowledge and tools, and even if I reached them, the noise would draw every infected aboard. The ship will drift, that is all. One morning, rain comes in a short, heavy burst. It fills my collection container by a few inches. I filter it, treat it, and store it in bottles. It feels like progress. Progress always has a cost. I had to go on deck to adjust the sheeting, exposed to infected above. Eyes scanning constantly, retreat routes planned before I stepped out. On that same deck trip, I see the mess more clearly. Bloodstains, bodies in odd corners, a cluster of cabin doors battered from inside, broken glass everywhere, half the lifeboats missing, half damaged. It looks like people tried to survive here for a while, then lost control. Some cabins show signs of organized living: stacked water bottles, makeshift bedding, taped signs on doors. Then those same cabins have blood on walls and drag marks leading out. That tells the story without words. Someone got infected, symptoms came fast, people panicked, people fought, infection spread. Then the ship became what it is now. Back inside, I keep living, I keep working, I keep Max fed and calm. I keep my safe spine maintained. I keep supplies counted. I keep the ship quiet near my base. I do not pretend I have conquered the ship. I have only carved a pocket of control inside a larger threat. Sometimes, in the late afternoon, when light slants through a porthole and the corridor is quiet, I sit with Max, and I talk. Not loud, not dramatic. I tell Max what I did today. I tell Max what I plan to do tomorrow. I talk about old cleaning jobs, about the way people used to throw towels on the floor and expect someone else to fix it. I talk about my sobriety in plain language, because plain language is harder to lie with. I tell Max that if I ever start drinking, I will stop checking my hands, and I will stop checking doors, and I will start taking chances that feel fun. Fun chances get you killed now. Max blinks and looks away, and then looks back. That is enough. At the end of 1 month on board, I do the full inventory again, and I write it down. Water is lower, but stable because rain collection supplements it. Food is lower, but stable because canned stock and ration bars exist. Batteries are lower, but stable because I keep lights minimal. Medical supplies are limited, but I have enough to treat small injuries if I stay disciplined. The biggest risk remains sound and navigation errors, not hunger. I stand at the hole in the hull one evening, and I look out at the sea. The shoreline is faint. The ship drifts slowly, hard to spot in flat light, hard to identify even through binoculars if I did not already know where to look. I think about that week on land when I watched it and I debated whether it was real. I understand now that the ship was not a miracle. It was a gamble. It still is. I climb down to my boat to check it again. The boat has weathered well tied to the hull. The tape on the rope wear point is frayed. I replace it. I bail out a little water and I check the resin seam, still holding. That boat remains my escape route if something goes wrong. I do not use it much. Still, I maintain it because maintenance is the difference between planning and begging. When I climb back up, Max is waiting at the tear, ears forward. Max watches the water below, tracking the bobbing infected body that still floats caught in debris. Max growls once, low. I place a hand on Max's shoulder for the first time. Light contact. Max does not pull away, Max stays focused on the water. I take my hand away, and I lead Max back inside. Night is coming. At night, the ship is loud in its own way. At night, infected drift toward random sounds. At night, my best plan is always the same. Keep my corner quiet, keep Max calm, keep doors secured, and wake up ready to work again. I close the door to my cabin, wedge it, and set the small metal hook alarm. I place water and food where I can reach them without standing. I check my hands once more, then check Max's paws for cuts. None. Good. Then I sit with my back to the wall, and I listen to the ship settle and creak through the dark. This is not paradise. This is not comfort. This is survival with structure, and that structure is the only reason I am still here. And that's where we'll stop for now. Thanks for listening. If you want to help this channel grow, you can leave a like, subscribe, or share your thoughts below. I read them all. This is Jack's Nightmares, signing off.